Performance is art, and art is the expression of your knowledge and experience. In other words, you cannot perform what you do not know. Yes, you may perform something that is beyond your knowledge and experience, but ask yourself, does your performance justify the original work? Are you able to share the mind and the heart of the selection to the audience? This is one mistake that we need to avoid. Performance is not just about performance alone. Performance is about sharing an idea, or telling a story, or keeping a culture alive. When we perform something, we need to give the highest respect to the piece we're performing to. And we can only do that by being able to understand and rehearse the selection. In this lecture, I will present you the process of oral interpretation, as well as ways on using the voice and body for performance. Oral interpretation is not just about reading a text or memorizing it. It takes a process of selection, analysis, rehearsal, performance, and evaluation. In other words, we need to prepare first before we perform. Gura and Powell emphasize that preparing for performance takes a lot of effort, but there is also a great deal of freedom in how you go to about preparing, and the more you perform, the more you will discover the method that best suits you. What they want to say is that preparation is not just about memorizing the text you selected. You also need the knowledge on selecting a text and how you analyze a text. Once you have the complete understanding of the selection, that will be the only time to plan on how to perform it. We already have an idea on how to select a text, so let's go to how we analyze a selection. First is to look at the meanings of the words and the lines. When we look at the meaning of the lines, we look at both their denotative and connotative meanings. After we make sense of the meanings of the text we selected, we now look at the persona, or the speaker of the text. Sometimes the persona is the author or writer of the text, but in some cases, the author may not be the persona. Knowing the persona allows us to determine the role or roles that you will play in your performance. Knowing the persona also allows us to check the thought and attitude of the speaker. The next component that we need to look at is the locus. We may ask ourselves this question: what is the physical and psychological positions from which the speaker relates the events to the audience? In other words, when we look at the locus, we try to understand the speaker's relationship to the audience. Another component to look at is the climax. We know that climax in its logical sense is the culmination of the content, but climax can also be seen in its emotional sense by checking at the highest point of emotional impact. When we read and examine the text, we have to check both the logical and emotional climax. As we analyze the text, we need to check the balance and proportion of the text. Within a piece of literature, balance is brought about by the intensity or the proportion of content on either side of the point at which the entire selection seems to pivot and change direction. One thing to look at the balance is by locating the crisis or conflict of the text. This will help us see the shift or direction or emotion in the selection. And the final component to look at is rhythm. In poetry, rhythm is the relationship of the stressed and unstressed syllables. However, rhythm in prose is the interaction of logical and emotional content. Knowing the rhythm of the text will help us on our rehearsal, especially on imagining the manner of our performance. After justifying your selection and analyzing the selection by considering the structural, aesthetic, and technical components, you can now rehearse the text for your performance. The rehearsal process is designed to find the vocal and physical analogs which will bring all this material to an audience's sight and hearing. In other words, your job is to be the work of literature itself. Your performance is not meant to elevate you or your skills, but to bring your audience to the world of the text. A great performer is not seen to their showcase of skills and abilities, but on how they justify the performance. Every aspect of your performance, from voice to body postures to facial expressions to movements and the selection of accompaniment or aesthetics, should reflect and justify the text you selected. You don't need to be extra if these extra movements, voice production, or aesthetics are not necessary or don't have any meaning related to the selection you will perform. So, how will we know if our movements, voice, and aesthetics will justify the material? You can start by reading every line of your material. As you read every line, recall the major structural components that you took note earlier. This will help you to be careful in how you will perform the text. Then, take notes of the parts where you will adjust your voice, make body movements, or use aesthetics. Then, take notes of the parts where you will adjust your voice, make body movements, or use aesthetics. The output will be your script. It's not just a plain text of what you will memorize or read, but it is the culmination of your analysis and the things that you will rehearse. This will be your guide when you practice and repeat what you will perform. Remember that practice does not make you perfect. Practice makes things permanent. If what you are rehearsing lacks substance, then your performance lacks substance as well. The more you rehearse, the closer you come to the goal you imagine. Of course, rehearsal and performance include the use of our voice and body, which are important in oral interpretation. I will provide elements of both voice and body that we can focus or use for our performance. Let's begin with the voice. The elements that we need to consider are volume and projection, pitch and quality, rate and pause, intelligibility of speech, and dialect or accent. Volume is the degree of loudness, while projection is the target of your voice. You use volume and projection to provide intensity of your performance. You also use these to create a variation of narration or dialogue. In your performance, you may talk to the audience in front, or you may talk to the back, or to the side. One trick to project your voice is by throwing your voice. Imagine that your voice is a ball that you will throw to someone. As you throw the ball, you may call the person who will catch the ball. The adjustment of the volume and projection of your voice will happen as you do this. For pitch, it is important for interpreters to become skillful in using pitch to suggest shades of meaning and to build to climaxes, while vocal quality is associated with mood and feeling. Having an idea of the range of your pitch will make your rehearsal easier, while knowing your optimum pitch will help you achieve quality of your voice. You must also recognize phrasal pauses, which clarify the relationships of words in phrases to convey units of thought. When you read the material aloud, take note of the parts where you need to speak fast, or slow, or moderate, and take note of the parts where you can pause. Here, you need to observe the length of the words that you speak, including the length of the pauses between sounds. To be fully intelligible, speech should not only be audible, but also distinct and accurate. Take note of the pronunciation of the words. Also take note of how words are articulated. Listen to how words are pronounced. And you can use a mirror to see how your lips, teeth, and tongue move when you say the word or line. And finally, performing using your own accent or dialect is okay, as long as your audience will still understand you or as long as it will still give justice to the text you are performing. You need to take note of how your accent or dialect will or will not change the meaning of the words, and if your accent or dialect will affect the cultural context of the text. Now let's go to the use of body for performance. The elements that we need to consider are posture, muscle tone, gesture, and empathy. Posture is a matter of proper positional relations between the parts of the body. Having a good posture means that there is perfect natural alignment of the bones and muscles of your whole body so that each unit does its proper job of supporting and controlling the bodily structure without undue tension or strain. Posture not only represents the character you're portraying, but also shows the attitude and intention of the performer. Speaking of tension, muscle tone is the degree of tension or relaxation present in the entire body. When your body is tense, then the voice that you produce is also tense. Having a tense body will also affect your mental attitude and your posture. That is why you need to relax your body before you rehearse or perform to ease the tension. You may follow a breathing and relaxation exercise and even do warm-up exercises followed by cool-down exercises to prepare your mind and body for the rehearsal or performance. The next element is gesture. Gesture is any clearly discernible movement which helps express or emphasize an idea. It is an integral part of bodily action because it shows and complements the material and the personality of the speaker in relation to the material. Sometimes the gestures we show during our performance is grown out from our own personality and not based on the suggestion of the text. We can avoid that by concentrating on the text and by being conscious of our movements during rehearsals. We must also remember that any movement, whether big or small, is significant and must associate a meaning. A good gesture conforms to no rules except the rule of effectiveness. If you think that gestures and movements will not contribute to the effectiveness of your performance, then it's best to not perform the movements. And finally, the last element is the use of empathy, or the imaginal or mental projection of oneself into the elements of a work of art. Empathy is important because if you don't feel the piece, you won't be able to justify your performance or even show emotion to your performance. Remember that the interaction of emotional and physical response is the basis of empathy. So how do you achieve empathy? First is to have a full mental, emotional, and physical response to the piece. The next is to go to the shoes of the audience. What will be the audience's response to the interpreter's material? These are some of the things that you need to keep in mind before you perform a text. You have to understand the material by justifying your selection and analyzing its structural, aesthetic, and technical components. Once you understand the material, you may now develop a performance plan that you will use as a guide for your rehearsal. The secret to a good performance is to have good understanding of the material and careful planning of your rehearsal. To be an effective performer, you have to rehearse again and again until your muscle memory is accustomed to the performance and your heart and mind are now ready to perform. But don't forget to relax first to ease the tensions. To end, confidence is built through knowledge and experience, and so is performance.